There is a quiet wound many people carry into adulthood, one that does not bleed, yet shapes every relationship they enter. It is not a wound of broken hearts, but of unmet needs. A wound formed long before romantic love ever appeared, and until it is seen, felt, and understood, love will continue to feel fragile, confusing, or unreachable. As children, we do not need perfect parents. We need present ones. We need to be seen in our emotions, not corrected for having them. We need safety more than instruction. When that safety is missing, the child does not rebel. The child adapts. And adaptation is where the wound begins. Some children learn that being needy leads to rejection, so they become independent too early. Some learn that expressing anger threatens connection, so they become agreeable and quiet. Some learn that love is unpredictable, so they stay hypervigilant, always watching for signs of abandonment. These are not personality traits. These are survival strategies. The tragedy is that what once protected us now interferes with intimacy. When love arrives in adulthood, it asks something dangerous of us: presence, vulnerability, emotional risk. But the nervous system remembers a time when those very things led to pain. So we pull away, or we cling, or we try to earn love by self-erasure. We say we want love, yet our bodies are still protecting us from it. This is why love feels exhausting for some, terrifying for others, and disappointing for many, not because love is broken, but because it is landing on an old wound. We often believe trauma is about what happened to us, but trauma is more accurately about what did not happen, the comfort that never came, the protection that was absent, the permission to feel that was denied. These absences shape our sense of worth and our capacity for connection. When those early needs are unmet, we grow into adults who mistake attachment for love. We confuse intensity with intimacy. We tolerate harm to avoid loneliness. We call familiarity love, even when it hurts, and then we ask ourselves why love never heals us. Love alone cannot heal a wound that was created by emotional neglect. Love does not heal when it demands we abandon ourselves. Love does not heal when it feels unsafe. Healing requires awareness. It requires compassion for the child who had no choice but to adapt. The moment healing begins is not when you find the right partner. It is when you stop judging your patterns and start understanding them. When you realize that your fear of closeness, your need to please, your urge to withdraw were once intelligent responses to an environment that could not meet you. Nothing is wrong with you. What is wrong is that you were taught, silently, that love required self-sacrifice, silence, or vigilance. Healing means learning a new relationship with yourself, one where your emotions are welcome, where boundaries are allowed, where connection does not require losing yourself. When the childhood wound is finally seen with compassion, love stops being something you chase or fear. It becomes something you can receive. And that is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of wholeness. Love fails not because people are incapable of love, but because love requires a foundation that was never built, and that foundation is safety. When safety is absent in early life, love later becomes something the nervous system does not recognize as secure, even when the mind longs for it. As children, we learn what love feels like not through words, but through the body. We learn it through tone, touch, consistency, and emotional presence. If the environment is unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, or threatening, the child does not conclude that the environment is unsafe. The child concludes that they themselves must change in order to belong. This is where love begins to fracture before it ever forms. A child who does not feel safe cannot relax into connection. Instead, they scan, adapt, and manage. They become attuned not to their own needs, but to the emotional states of others. They learn when to stay quiet, when to please, when to disappear, and when to perform. This is not dysfunction. This is intelligence shaped by necessity. But what the child learns to do to survive becomes the template for adult love. In adulthood, love asks us to be present. It asks us to feel deeply, to trust, to open, to stay. Yet the body remembers that closeness once carried risk. So even when love is offered, the nervous system tightens instead of softens. This is why some people feel anxious in relationships without knowing why. Why reassurance never feels like enough. Why closeness brings fear instead of comfort. Why distance feels safer than intimacy. Love fails here, not because of lack of effort, but because the body never learned that connection could exist without threat. Safety is not a concept. It is a felt experience. It is the ability to be oneself without fear of punishment, abandonment, or emotional withdrawal. When this is missing in childhood, the body learns that love must be earned or managed, so we grow into adults who confuse love with vigilance. We believe love means constant effort, self-monitoring, or sacrifice. We call intensity connection, we call anxiety passion, we call familiarity love, even when it hurts. And when love does not heal us, we assume something is wrong with us or with our partners. But love cannot heal a wound it keeps triggering. Many people enter relationships hoping to finally feel safe. But safety cannot be created by another person when it was never internally learned. Without safety, love feels like exposure. Vulnerability feels dangerous. Dependence feels humiliating. So people protect themselves in different ways. Some become emotionally distant. They value independence above all else. They keep love at arm's length and call it strength. But underneath there is a fear that needing someone will lead to loss of self. Others become emotionally fused. They attach quickly and intensely. They fear abandonment more than self-abandonment. They stay too long, give too much, and tolerate too much. They call it love, but it is survival disguised as devotion. Both responses are rooted in the same wound, the absence of safety. The tragedy is not that love fails. The tragedy is that people blame themselves for failing at love. What is often called relationship failure is actually the nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do: protect first, feel later if at all. Safety was never taught explicitly. It was supposed to be absorbed implicitly, through being held emotionally, through having feelings mirrored rather than dismissed, through knowing that anger, sadness, and fear would not threaten connection. When this did not happen, the child learned that authenticity was unsafe, so they learned to perform instead. Healing begins not by fixing relationships, but by understanding this truth. Love does not fail because you are broken. Love struggles because your body learned to survive before it learned to trust. Safety must now be relearned slowly and compassionately, through self-awareness, through noticing when the body tightens in connection, through honoring boundaries without guilt, through allowing emotions without judgment. This is not quick work, and it is not romantic, but it is honest. As safety grows internally, love changes externally. Relationships no longer feel like tests to pass or threats to manage. They become places of mutual presence rather than emotional negotiation. Love does not heal by intensity. It heals through safety. And when safety is finally learned, love no longer feels impossible. It feels natural. The child does not disconnect because they are weak, cold, or incapable of love. The child disconnects because connection became unsafe. In an environment where emotions are ignored, minimized, punished, or overwhelmed by adult needs, the child learns a painful lesson very early. Being fully present is dangerous. Feeling deeply is risky. Needing comfort might lead to rejection. So the child adapts. This adaptation is not conscious. It happens in the body long before language develops. The nervous system learns to dampen sensation, to leave the moment, to numb awareness. This is not a choice. It is survival. When the child realizes that expressing sadness does not bring comfort, the sadness is pushed inward. When anger threatens connection, anger is swallowed. When joy is met with indifference, joy becomes quieter. Bit by bit, the child learns which parts of themselves are welcome and which parts must disappear. Disconnection becomes protection. Many children grow up in homes where food is provided and education is prioritized, yet emotional presence is scarce. There may be no overt abuse, no shouting, no visible cruelty, just absence, just distraction, just parents who are stressed, overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or carry their own unhealed pain. To the child, this absence feels personal. Children always assume responsibility for the emotional climate around them. If connection is missing, the child assumes they are the problem. So they adapt by disconnecting from their own needs. Some children become invisible. They stop asking. They stop expecting. They learn to be low maintenance. They receive praise for being easy, mature, or independent. No one notices that independence arrived too early. Other children become hyper-attuned. They read moods. They anticipate reactions. They become emotional caretakers long before they understand their own feelings. They are rewarded for being helpful and empathetic. No one notices the cost. Disconnection does not always look like numbness. Sometimes it looks like competence. Sometimes it looks like success. Sometimes it looks like constant bitterness or intellectualization. But underneath there is a separation from the inner world. The child learns to leave themselves in order to stay connected to others. This disconnection follows the child into adulthood. As adults, these individuals may struggle to name what they feel. They may feel uncomfortable with stillness. They may experience anxiety, emptiness, or restlessness without understanding why. They may feel disconnected from their bodies, their desires, or their sense of aliveness. In relationships, intimacy becomes complicated. Being seen feels exposing. Depending on someone feels unsafe. Receiving care feels unfamiliar or undeserved. So the same strategies return. The adult may intellectualize emotions instead of feeling them. They may joke, distract, or stay busy when feelings arise. They may withdraw when closeness deepens. They may keep relationships superficial while longing for depth. This is not self-sabotage. This is a continuation of adaptation. The body does not forget what it learned early. If presence once led to pain, absence feels safer. If vulnerability once led to disappointment, control feels protective. Disconnection becomes the default state. What is often labeled as avoidance, emotional unavailability, or fear of intimacy is frequently the residue of early disconnection. The nervous system learned to survive by leaving the moment, and yet the cost is profound. Disconnection dulls not only pain but joy. It limits creativity, spontaneity, and deep satisfaction. Life may feel manageable, but not fully alive. Many people reach adulthood believing something essential is missing. They chase achievement, relationships, or constant stimulation hoping to feel whole, but wholeness cannot be found outside when the inner connection is broken. The tragedy is that this disconnection was once intelligent. The child who disconnected did exactly what was needed to endure. There is no pathology in this. There is wisdom. Healing does not begin by forcing connection. It begins by honoring the reason for disconnection. When adults judge themselves for being distant, numb, or avoidant, they reinforce the original wound. When they meet these patterns with curiosity and compassion, something begins to soften. Reconnection cannot be rushed. The nervous system needs proof that presence is now safe, that feelings will not overwhelm, that needs will not lead to abandonment. This happens slowly, through gentle awareness of bodily sensations, through noticing emotions without immediately escaping them, through relationships that allow space, boundaries, and authenticity. As reconnection grows, the individual may grieve. They may feel the sadness that was once suppressed. They may feel the anger that was once unsafe. They may feel the longing that was once unbearable. This grief is not regression, it is integration. The child who disconnected is not broken. They are waiting for safety, waiting for permission, waiting for presence. And when reconnection finally begins, it does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet, grounded, real. The child no longer needs to disappear. They can finally come home. Unmet needs do not disappear when childhood ends. They go underground. They shape perception, behavior, and relationship patterns without ever announcing themselves. A child comes into the world with simple needs: to be seen, to be soothed, to be protected, to be mirrored emotionally. When these needs are met consistently, the child develops a quiet confidence and connection. When they are not met, the child does not protest forever. Eventually, the child adapts. That adaptation often looks like self-reliance, emotional restraint, or people-pleasing. But underneath, the original needs remain alive. They are simply no longer conscious. What cannot be expressed directly becomes expected indirectly. The adult may say they do not need much. They may insist on independence. They may pride themselves on not asking for help. Yet in relationships, there is often a silent hope that someone will finally notice, anticipate, and respond without being asked. This is not manipulation. It is unfinished development. Unmet needs turn into unconscious expectations because the nervous system still seeks completion. The body remembers the absence. It continues to scan the environment for what was missing. When a partner does not respond in the hoped-for way, the reaction often feels disproportionate. Disappointment feels like devastation. Distance feels like abandonment. Misattunement feels like rejection. The intensity of the reaction does not belong to the present moment. It belongs to the past that is still alive inside the body. Many adults enter relationships believing they are choosing freely, but often they are reenacting. They are drawn to dynamics that feel familiar, even when they are painful. Familiarity feels like truth to the nervous system. A person who did not feel emotionally seen may unconsciously choose partners who are distracted or unavailable. A person who had to earn love may be drawn to relationships that require constant effort. A person who felt abandoned may cling to those who pull away. These patterns are not accidents. They are attempts at resolution. The psyche hopes that this time will be different, that this time the ending will change, that the unmet need will finally be met. But unconscious expectations are rarely communicated clearly. They are felt, not spoken. They appear as resentment, disappointment, or emotional withdrawal. The partner is expected to know, to sense, to fill a gap that was never explained. And when they fail, the pain feels personal, not because the partner is cruel, but because the wound is old. This is where many relationships begin to fracture. One partner feels burdened by demands they do not understand. The other feels unseen yet again. Both feel confused. Both feel alone. Love becomes a battleground for unmet needs. The tragedy is that the expectation itself is invisible to the person holding it. They believe they are reacting to the present. They do not realize they are protecting the past. Unmet needs also distort perception. Neutral behaviors are interpreted through the lens of deprivation. A delayed message feels like neglect. A request for space feels like abandonment. A boundary feels like rejection. The body reacts before the mind can reason. This does not mean the needs are wrong. The needs were always valid. What hurts is that they were never met at the right time. Healing does not mean becoming needless. It means becoming conscious. When unmet needs are brought into awareness, they lose their grip. They can be named, felt, grieved. Grief is essential here. There is grief for what was missed, for the comfort that never came, for the attunement that was absent, for the protection that did not arrive. Without grief, the need remains frozen in time. It keeps searching for fulfillment in the present. As awareness grows, expectations can become requests. Needs can be communicated instead of acted out. Boundaries can be honored without collapse. The adult learns to differentiate between now and then, between the partner in front of them and the caregivers who could not show up. This differentiation creates freedom. Relationships become spaces of choice rather than compulsion. Disappointment becomes tolerable. Closeness becomes safer. Distance becomes survivable. The unmet needs do not vanish. They transform. They are no longer burdens placed on another person. They become invitations for self-compassion, self-responsibility, and honest connection. When a person can say, even silently, this reaction belongs to something older, something softens. The nervous system relaxes. The present moment opens. Love no longer carries the impossible task of repairing the past. And when love is freed from that burden, it has a chance to be real. Trauma is often misunderstood as a catalog of painful events. People search their memories for something dramatic enough to justify the pain they feel. They compare their stories to others and minimize their own experience. Nothing terrible happened, they say. And yet something inside them feels fractured. Trauma is not defined by the event itself. It is defined by what the event took away. A child does not need catastrophe to be traumatized. They need attunement. They need to feel emotionally held. When that holding is absent, something essential is lost. What is lost is not innocence. It is trust. It is the sense that the world is responsive. It is the felt experience of being safe while being oneself. This loss happens quietly, often in ordinary homes, with well-meaning caregivers, with no obvious villains. Parents may be loving but distracted, present physically but absent emotionally, overwhelmed by their own stress, trauma, or expectations. The child does not experience this as circumstance. They experience it as absence. When a child's fear is not soothed, they lose trust and comfort. When their anger is not allowed, they lose trust and expression. When their sadness is rushed away, they lose trust and vulnerability. These losses accumulate. The child learns that certain emotional states do not belong in relationship, so they remove those parts of themselves, not consciously, but instinctively. Trauma lives in these removals. It lives in the part of the self that learned not to feel, in the part that learned not to ask, in the part that learned not to expect. This is why people with trauma often struggle to name what hurts. They do not remember a single event. They remember a pattern of absence. What was lost cannot be pointed to easily, but it can be felt. There is often a vague sense of emptiness, a sense of disconnection, a chronic feeling of not quite belonging. These are not personality traits. They are echoes of loss. Trauma also distorts time. The nervous system does not distinguish between past and present. When something in the present resembles the original loss, the body reacts as if it is happening again. A partner. As distraction feels like abandonment. A boundary feels like rejection. A disagreement feels like danger. The reaction is immediate. It bypasses logic. This is not overreaction. It is memory stored in the body. The loss that defines trauma is often relational. It is the loss of emotional presence, the loss of being mirrored, the loss of having one as inner world acknowledged. Without this, the child cannot develop a stable sense of self. They grow up adapting to others rather than inhabiting themselves. They become experts at reading the room, at managing impressions, at anticipating needs, but they lose contact with their own. This is the hidden cost of trauma. Competence replaces authenticity. Many adults spend years trying to fix themselves. They chase productivity, success, or self-improvement. They believe something is wrong with them. What is actually wrong is that something precious was taken away too early. Healing does not begin with revisiting events. It begins with mourning losses, mourning the safety that was missing, the comfort that never arrived, the permission to feel that was never granted. Grief is not indulgent. It is necessary. Without grief, the nervous system remains vigilant, still searching for what was lost. When loss is acknowledged, something shifts. The body begins to relax. The self begins to return. This does not mean blaming caregivers. It means telling the truth about experience. Many caregivers did the best they could, and still, something was missing. Both can be true. Healing allows complexity. It allows gratitude and grief to coexist. As losses are integrated, the present becomes clearer. The adult no longer expects relationships to repair what was never given. They no longer collapse when disappointment appears. They begin to build what was missing internally: safety, presence, compassion. Trauma loses its power not when it is erased, but when what was lost is restored in new ways, through relationships that allow authenticity, through practices that reconnect the body, through self-compassion that replaces self-judgment. The wound was not caused by weakness. It was caused by absence. And what was lost can be found again, not by returning to the past, but by creating in the present what was missing. Then attachment is a biological need. Love is an emotional capacity. When these two are confused, relationships become places of survival rather than connection. From the very beginning of life, attachment is essential. A child must stay close to caregivers to survive. This closeness is not optional. It is wired into the nervous system. When attachment is secure, love can grow naturally. But when attachment is anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, love becomes entangled with fear. The child does not question this. They simply adapt. If closeness is unpredictable, the child learns to cling. If closeness feels overwhelming, the child learns to distance. If closeness carries both comfort and threat, the child learns confusion. These patterns do not disappear with age. They become the blueprint for adult relationships. As adults, many people say they are in love when they are actually attached. They feel intense longing. They feel fear at the thought of loss. They feel a sense of relief when the other is near. These feelings are powerful, but they are not the same as love. Attachment says, "Do not leave me." Love says, "I see you." Attachment is about regulation. Love is about recognition. When attachment wounds are present, relationships are driven by anxiety. People monitor texts, tone, availability. They read meaning into silence. They feel destabilized by distance. This is not romance. It is the nervous system seeking safety. Others respond differently. They equate love with independence. They minimize need. They withdraw when closeness deepens. They call this self-sufficiency. But often it is attachment avoidance disguised as strength. Both patterns are attempts to manage fear, fear of abandonment, fear of engulfment. Love, however, cannot grow in fear. When attachment is mistaken for love, intensity becomes proof. Drama becomes chemistry. Pain becomes depth. People stay in relationships that hurt because leaving feels like dying. They endure neglect, disrespect, or inconsistency because the attachment bond is activated. They say, "I cannot live without this person." What they mean is, "My nervous system does not know how to regulate without them." This is not a moral failure. It is a developmental injury. Many people learned early that connection was unstable, so they equate love with urgency. They feel alive only when attachment is threatened. When things are calm, they feel bored. When things are secure, they feel uneasy. Security feels unfamiliar. Familiarity feels like truth. This confusion keeps people trapped. They chase unavailable partners. They recreate early dynamics. They mistake longing for intimacy. Love is not longing. Love is presence. Love does not require you to abandon yourself. Attachment often does. In attachment-driven relationships, boundaries feel threatening. Autonomy feels like rejection. Needs feel shameful. In love-based relationships, boundaries create safety. Autonomy is respected. Needs are spoken without fear. The difference is subtle but profound. Attachment asks, "Will you stay?" Love asks, "Can we be ourselves together?" When attachment wounds dominate, people try to extract love. They demand reassurance. They test loyalty. They manipulate closeness. This erodes trust. It exhausts connection. The tragedy is that what they are seeking is not wrong. They are seeking safety, but safety cannot be extracted. It must be cultivated. Healing begins when attachment is seen clearly, when intensity is no longer confused with intimacy, when fear is no longer mistaken for passion. This awareness allows choice. People can pause and ask, am I responding to love or to fear? Am I moving toward this person from fullness or from hunger? As attachment wounds heal, love changes. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, more stable. It feels less like a high and more like a ground. This can feel unfamiliar at first, even disappointing. But over time, the body learns a new truth. Connection does not have to hurt. Closeness does not have to cost the self. When attachment and love are no longer confused, relationships stop being survival strategies. They become places of mutual presence, mutual respect, mutual growth. And in that space, love finally has room to exist, healing, does not begin with self-improvement. It begins with self-understanding. For many people, the first response to pain is blame. They blame themselves for their reaction. They blame their partners for triggering them. They blame their past for not being different. Blame feels active. It gives the illusion of control, but it quietly deepens the wound. Blame keeps the nervous system in threat. It reinforces the belief that something is wrong. It continues the inner environment that caused the injury in the first place. Compassion creates something different. Compassion is not indulgence. It is clarity without cruelty. It is the willingness to look at pain without attacking the one who carries it. When a person responds to their own patterns with judgment, the body tightens. Shame activates the same stress pathways as danger. The system braces. Learning stops. This is why insight alone does not heal. Understanding without compassion often turns into self-criticism. Many adults look back at their coping strategies with embarrassment. They ask why they stayed too long, why they tolerated mistreatment, why they pushed people away, why they lost themselves in relationships. These questions sound reasonable, but beneath them is an assumption of failure. The truth is simpler and kinder. Those strategies once kept them safe. Blame erases context. Compassion restores it. A person did not become anxious, avoidant, or controlling by choice. These patterns formed in environments where safety was inconsistent or absent. They were intelligent responses to real conditions. When this truth is seen, the inner tone begins to shift. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" the question becomes, "What happened to me?" This question does not excuse harm. It explains behavior. Healing requires this shift. Without compassion, attempts at change feel like self-erasure. With compassion, change feels like growth. Many people try to force healing through discipline. They set rules, they suppress emotions, they demand progress. But the nervous system does not respond to commands. It responds to safety. Compassion signals safety. When a person meets their fear with gentleness, the fear softens. When they meet their anger with curiosity, the anger reveals its purpose. When they meet their withdrawal with understanding, connection becomes possible. Blame says, "Stop feeling this." Compassion says, "I see why this is here. This difference is everything." In relationships, blame creates distance. It fuels defensiveness. It reinforces old dynamics. Compassion allows responsibility without shame. It allows repair without collapse. A person can say, "I reacted strongly," and there is a reason. They can take accountability without self-annihilation. This balance is essential. Many people avoid compassion because they fear it will keep them stuck. They believe kindness will excuse harmful behavior. They confuse compassion with permission. But compassion does not mean staying the same. It means changing without violence. Violence toward the self always recreates trauma. Healing asks for patience. The nervous system learned its patterns over years, sometimes over generations. Expecting immediate change is another form of blame. Compassion respects timing. It honors the pace at which the body feels safe enough to shift. This is especially important when old emotions emerge: grief, rage, fear. These emotions were once too dangerous to feel. They were stored away to protect the self. When they resurface, blame tries to push them back. Compassion allows them to move through. Allowing does not mean acting out. It means acknowledging presence. When emotions are met with compassion, they complete their cycle. When they are judged, they intensify. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming whole. Wholeness includes the parts that adapted, the parts that learned to hide, the parts that learned to survive. Compassion invites these parts back into awareness. As compassion deepens, the inner environment changes. The voice that once criticized becomes curious. The body that once braced begins to relax. This inner shift affects outer relationships. People become less reactive, more grounded, more able to stay present during difficulty. They stop demanding perfection from themselves and others. Love becomes possible when blame loosens. This does not mean pain disappears. It means pain is no longer faced alone. Compassion is the ground on which all healing stands. Without it, every effort becomes another demand. With it, healing becomes a process of return, a return to presence, a return to safety, a return to self. This is where healing truly begins.